Hello and welcome back to the Center for Critical and Cultural Theory. My name is Dr. Roger Green, and this will be a contextualized reading for Book 13 of Homer's Odyssey for our course, Homer and the Critique of Western Civilization. Book 13 takes us to the end of we've just ended Odysseus's tales to the Phaeacians. And so we get a narrative shift that opens up the book. We get a shift back to the Homer narrator instead of Odysseus speaking, right? So his tale was over. The Phaeacians all fell silent, hushed, his story holding them spellbound down the shadowed halls until Alcinous found the poise to say. And so there's this that aesthetics of wonderment, right, that has persisted throughout the text as well, that where people are just stunned, people are marveling at something, and oftentimes around someone's tale that strikes them deeply. And Alcinous, addresses the rest of the Phaeacians and says, this guest is amazing. And he says, come, each of us, at a sumptuous tripod, at a cauldron. We're all going to give him gifts. We're going to load him down with gifts. We're going to make him wealthy again and send him on his way. And then he says, we will recover our costs with levies on the people. It's hard to afford such a bounty man by man. And so this just gives us, if we're thinking about the critique of Western civilization and we're thinking about the ways that texts like this get used as foundational for the ways that we think in Western civilization, I think it just, it's worth pointing out the fact that here there are these noble people. They've gotten together, they like someone, and they're going to pay for them by taxing the people higher, right? If anything, it just shows us that, in the, 700s-ish BCE, that taxes were being used, and that there are some people in power and they levy taxes on to other people. And so I've been reading this attentive to the people who seem like extras in a movie, right? Reading this epic text a little bit against the grain of the heroic narrative that is definitely the dominant presence of our main characters here. The king's instructions were met with warm applause, and home they went to sleep, each in his own house. When young Dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, they hurried down to the ship with handsome bronze gifts, and striding along the decks, the ardent King Alcinous stowed them under the benches ship-shape, so nothing could foul the crewmen tugging at their oars. Then back the party went to Alcinous's house, and they shared a royal feast. And we get a sacrifice here, and so this is an important one, I think. The majestic king slaughtered an ox for them to Cronus's mighty son, Zeus, right? Zeus of the thundercloud, whose power rules the world. They burned the thighs and fell to the lordly banquet, reveling there, while in their midst the inspired bard struck up a song, Demodocus. So now we've shifted back, from Odysseus's tale, and so Demodocus is now telling is now singing. Demodocus prized by all the people. True, but time and again Odysseus turned his face toward the radiant sun, anxious for it to set, yearning now to be gone and home once more, as a man aches for his evening meal when all day long his brace of wine-dark oxen have dragged the bolted plowshare down a fallow field. How welcome the setting sun to him, the going home to supper, yes, though his knees buckle, struggling home at last. So welcome now to Odysseus, the setting light of day, and he lost no time as he pressed Phaeacius men who love their oars. What a wonderful simile that the poet gives us there. And it's interesting that it's this agricultural sort of simile that is given to Odysseus here. Alcinous, he presses Alcinous. All is made good. My heart's desire. You your convoy home your precious loving gifts, and may the gods of Olympus bless them for me. May I find an an unswerving wife when I reach home, and loved ones hail unharmed. And you, my friends, remaining here in your kingdom, may you delight in your loyal wives and children. May the gods rain down all kinds of fortune on your lives. Misfortune never harbor in your homeland. And then there's a toast to Arete, to excellence, right? The queen of the Phaeacians. Your health, my queen, though all your days to come, through all your days to come, until old age and death that visit all mankind pay you a visit too. Now I'm on my way, but may you take joy in this house of yours, in your children, your people, Alcinous the king. And then Odysseus strides across the threshold. King Alcinous sends a herald off with the guest to lead him down to the swift ship in the foaming surf. Arete sends her serving women, one to carry a sea cloak washed and fresh, a shirt as well, another assigned to bear the sturdy chest, and a third to take the bread and ruddy wine. And then as soon as Odysseus gets on the ship and it sets off, he falls into a deep sleep. An irresistible sleep fell deeply on his eyes, the sweetest, soundest oblivion, still as the sleep of death itself. And the ship, like a four-horse team careering down the plain, all breaking as one with the whiplash cracking smartly, leaping with hoofs high to run the course in no time. So the stern hove high and plunged with the seething rollers, crashing dark in her wake as she surged, unwavering, never flagging, no, not even a darting hawk, the quickest thing on wings could keep her pace. As on she ran, cutting the swells at top speed, bearing a man endowed with the gods' own wisdom, one who had suffered 20 years of torment, sick at heart, cleaving his way through wars of men and pounding waves at sea, but now he slept in peace, the memory of his struggles laid to rest. So there's restful sleep and this beautiful image of the ship and also horses being sort of melded together as the ship glides over the sea. And then that hour the star rose up, the clearest, brightest star that always heralds the newborn light of day. The deep sea-going ship made landfall on the island Ithaca at last. And so there's this kind of mystical otherworldliness about the Phaeacians that we've seen. They're closer to the gods. And they're able to just travel overnight, like almost like it's like Peter Pan, right? And they're going to Neverland. And they've brought him back asleep all the way to Ithaca. They leave him near a harbor that's sacred to the nymphs of the springs that they call the Naiads. A special cave there where they where he's going to put all of his goods. And there's we get a little bit of a description about the cave itself. The cave has two ways in, one facing the north wind, a pathway down for mortals. The other facing the south belongs to the gods. No man may go that way. It is the path for all of the deathless powers. And so there is this kind of in between this liminal space that has been transgressed or transversed, I guess, is a better term there, as Odysseus makes his way back to Ithaca. And here at this bay, the Phaeacian crew put in. They lay him down on the beach, linen and lustrous carpet too, and laid him down on the sand to sleep, still dead to all the world. Then hoisted out the treasures, proud Phaeacians urged by open-hearted Pallas and lavish on him, setting out for home. And then they leave him, and then on their way home, of course, we get this break-in from Poseidon, who complains to Zeus, and Zeus, this kind of mimics what Zeus has told to Athena earlier. Remember, the whole Odyssey opens up this way, with Athena complaining to Zeus, and Zeus says the same, has the same sort of reaction. He says, "Incredible Earthshaker, with you with your massive power, why are you moaning so? The gods don't disrespect you. What a stir there'd be if they flung abuse at the oldest, noblest of them all. These mortals, if any man so lost in his strength and prowess pays you no respect, just pay him back. Just do it." Just like he tells Athena early on, he's like, "This was all your plan to begin with. If you remember all of this stuff that's going to happen with Odysseus, do what you like," he says, "whatever warms your heart." And so Poseidon wreaks his revenge on the Phaeacians. He says, "Now I'll crush that fine Phaeacian, cut her out on the misty sea. Now on her homeward run from the last convoy, they will learn at last to cease and desist from escorting every man alive. I'll plunge a huge mountain around their port." And then Zeus breaks in and he gives him even more. He says, "Wait, dear brother. Here's what seems best to me. As the people all lean down from their city heights to watch her speeding home, strike her into a rock that looks just like a racing vessel just offshore. Amaze all men with a marvel for the ages. Then pile your huge mountain around their port." So again, the aesthetics of wonderment and amazement that we get from the gods. And he does, and the Phaeacians are aghast, these lords with the long oars. The master mariners traded startling glances, sudden cries, "Look, who's pinned our swift ship to the sea, just racing for home, just hove into plain view." And so the prophecy is fulfilled, right? Alcinous says this. We already heard about it earlier on in the text. My father's prophecy used to say that Poseidon was vexed with us because we escorted all mankind and never came to grief. He said that one day a well-built ship of ours sailed home on the misty sea. From such a convoy, the gods would crush it. And what we see here is that there's like this play with temporality, right? Like that not only has there been a sort of prophecy, even the way the language here suggests that this has already happened in some sort of way for the Phaeacians. And it's almost like a memory coming back to them. And so immediately what they do, as for Poseidon's sacrifice 12 bulls to the god at once, pick the pick of the herds, perhaps he'll pity us, pile no looming mountain ridge around our port. The people, terrified, prepared the bulls at once, so all of Phaeacia's island lords and captains, milling round the altar, lifted prayers to Poseidon, masters of the sea. That very moment, and then at the same time that that's happening, there's this nice narrative shift. Great Odysseus woke from sleep on native ground at last. He'd been away for years, but failed to know the land, for the goddess Pallas Athena, Zeus's daughter, showered mist over all, so under cover she might change his appearance from head to foot, as she told him every peril he'd meet at home. So he's disoriented when he awakes, and the island looks strange to them, and then he cries out in anguish, and he starts blaming the Phaeacians. He suspects them immediately, right? And he says, "What, are they here? Violent, savage, lawless." Same thing kind of thing that shows up in every new territory that someone finds themselves in. Are they savage? Are they lawless? Or friendly to strangers, God-fearing men? Do they know what Xenia is? The stranger law, right? This word savage shows up, and I may have mentioned this in an earlier contextualized reading. It's a choice, of course, that comes from our translator, Robert Fagles. In the English language, so it comes from a word meaning sort of people of the woods, selvage, right? The forest, the woodsy people. And in other European languages, for example, in French, the word sauvage, from which was where we inherited it from in English because of the French invasion, it just means wild, and it doesn't have as much of the negative, perhaps, connotation. But we see with European interactions with Native Americans on Turtle Island, where I live, in the 1600s, in the early 1600s, there's a linguistic pejoration that the term savage goes through. And that word pejoration just means like a negative connotation. So it's not just that they're people of the woods, it's that there's this kind of brutality and a sense of hostility that gets imposed onto the native people as well. And that comes with the beginnings of modern race relations, and the concept of whiteness is then sort of promoted by the Anglo-Europeans, the Euro-Christians, as I call them, because you can't really divorce their aspirations for being in the new continent from the politics and their religion, and their sense of entitlement and their sense of seeing themselves as kind of newer versions of Israelites, right? That's why they call the new so-called New England, they call it New Jerusalem, right? So they're already figuring their national fantasies based on this idea of race and savagery, and it is in that sort of comparison with the woody people, the native people of the continent, and their sense of entitlement grows to extreme amounts that I will not be able to go into in detail here. But all of this is to know that this word savage has a particular ring for us in the English language, and that particular ring that we can hear as English speakers today comes from that history of an encounter and a justification for what becomes modern white supremacy, right? And I think that it's a choice word for Fagles to use here in the translation. Those of us, if we're really being critical about the Western civilization thing, need to think about the ways that this is tapped back into and read back into ancient Greek literature. If I were a Greek scholar, I would delve even more into the terminology in Greek. Of course, the strangeness shows up as something of lawlessness. What do we do with the barbarians who can't speak? That word barbarian is meant, as I've said, as an onomatopoeia. It's a word that meant to be babble. The word babble comes from this too, right? The Greeks can't understand, so it meant somebody who couldn't understand Greek. In ancient cultures, we clearly see that ethnocentrism is a prevalent thing, and that people are racialized, but it is not, as I've said over and over again, it is not the skin color based racism that emerges in modernity. Certainly not the pseudoscience that comes out of the science of the 1800s of race theory that comes to inform so much of our problems today. That said, if we take seriously what the critical race theorists have said, and we say yeah, of course it's not going to look the same way in the past, but patterns of human domination are racialized and transform over time. I think that we can see some of that going on back here in this text itself. And so we see that there's class going on, right? There's social class going on. There are servants. There's human trafficking. There were these people who were closer to the gods, the Phaeacians, who Odysseus immediately comes to suspect because he doesn't know what's going on. And so we can see, even though he's been treated really, really well, just see how easily he comes to suspect these people. And then Athena appears to him and tells him, that he's actually home, right? He says she appears to him as a shepherd boy, and he says, "Greetings, friends. Since you're the first I've come on in this harbor, treat me kindly. No cruelty, please. Save these treasures. Save me too. I pray to you like a god. I fall before your knees and ask for mercy." And so here we have this kind of shift in status that shows up, right? We know that Odysseus is a king, and here's this lowly swineherd boy, and he's begging the swineherd boy, who he doesn't know yet is Athena, according to the laws of Zeus, according to Xenia. And Athena says, "You must be a fool, stranger, or come from nowhere. If you really have to ask what land this is, trust me, it's not so nameless after all. It's known throughout the world." And she describes the land, and then she names it Ithaca. And we get this pause moment, right? This nice little stanza break in the way that Fagles has lined out the text. "So, stranger, the name of the Ithaca's reached as far as Troy, and Troy, they say, is a long, hard sail from Greece. Ithaca, heart racing. Odysseus, the great exile, filled with joy to hear Athena, daughter of storming Zeus, pronounce that name. Ithaca, yes, I seem to have heard of Ithaca." And immediately he goes into the lying mode, wily Odysseus, right? And he makes up this lie, and he says, "I killed Idomeneus' son, Orsilochus, lightning on his legs, a man who beat all runners alive on that island. What a racer! He tried to rob me of all the spoil I'd won at Troy. The plunder I went to hell and back to capture true, cleaving my way through the wars of men and waves at sea. And just because I refused to please his father, serve under him at Troy, I led my own command." And he goes on with his tale here, which makes him the hero, but also tells how much he suffered. And Athena then changes into a woman, right? As the story ended, goddess Athena, gray eyes gleaming, broke into a smile and stroked him with her hand, and now she appeared a woman, tall, beautiful, skilled at weaving lovely things. Her words went flying straight towards Odysseus. "Any man, any god who you met would have to be some champion lying chief to get past you for all round craft and guile. You terrible man, foxy, ingenious, never tired of twists and tricks, so not even here on native soil would you give up those wily tales that warm the cockles of your heart. Come, enough of this now. We're both old hands at the arts of intrigue. Here among mortal men, you're far the best at tactics, spinning yarns, and I am famous among the gods for wisdom, cunning wiles too. Ah, but you never recognized me, did you? Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who always stands beside you, shields you in every exploit. Thanks to me, the Phaeacians all embraced you warmly." So she reveals herself here, right? "And now I'm here once more to weave a scheme with you and to hide the treasure trove Phaeacia's nobles lavished on you. I willed it, planned it so when you set out for home, and to tell you all the trials you must suffer in your palace. Endure them all you must. You have no choice, and to no one, no man, no woman, not a soul, reveal that you are the wanderer home at last. No, in silence you must bear a world of pain, subject yourself to the cruel abuse of men." And so this is an amplification on this theme. This is one of the oldest themes, of course, in literature. It's one of the reasons no one should mistake my course here on the critique of Western civilization for saying that we should not be reading a text like the Odyssey at all. What my critique is the ways that this text has been used to justify certain forms of racialized control, such as white supremacy, which have to do with a later mind, right? A later, particularly Anglo-Saxon mind that all the way back from my first lectures, the intro lecture, where Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, opens with this kind of tale reaching back to Troy, right? There's that reading backwards into things, the cultural imagination that needs to be critiqued. I would not say, Homer obviously is not like a white man. That concept of whiteness didn't really exist in his time. And what we get in these old tales, like it is wonderful that it is written down, and that we have the ability to look at this ancient piece of writing. Does everything in our civilization need to completely be based on this? Is the idea of civilization itself embedded in the inequities that are in this text? That is the stuff that maybe is stuff that we need to critique. But do not mistake me for saying that this is some. I wouldn't be wasting all of this time making these contextualized readings if I didn't think it was worth digging into the text, right? And so the theme here is the stranger theme, the theme of the stranger in literature, and what do we do with strangers? And that, I think, is the presence of Xenia that is throughout this text is so important here. But I see here in this passage an amplification, where Odysseus not only is the stranger because he's wily and he's a trickster, he's the tactician, but it's something that he has to endure. He has to endure anonymity to a certain extent. And then he answers back, "Ah, goddess, you're so hard for a mortal man to know on sight. However shrewd he is, the shapes that you take are endless. But I do know this: you were kind to me in the war years, so long as the men of Achaea soldiered on at Troy. But once we'd sacked King Priam's craggy city, boarded a ship, and a god dispersed the fleet. From then on, daughter of Zeus, I never saw you, never glimpsed you striding along my decks towards some disaster. No, I wandered on, my heart forever torn to pieces inside my chest, till the gods released me from my miseries at last. And that day in the fertile kingdom, Phaeacia, when you cheered me on with words in person, led me to their city. But now I beg you by your almighty Father's name, for I can't believe I've reached my sunny Ithaca. I must be roaming around some more exotic land. You're mocking me, I know it." So there's that kind of theme of disbelief that shows up and pushes the tension on. And Athena rebukes him gently. "Always the same, your wary turn of mind," Athena exclaimed, her glances flashing warmly. "That's why I can't forsake you in your troubles. You are so winning, so worldly wise, so self-possessed. Anyone else come back from wandering the long hard would have hurried home at once, delighted to see his children and his wife. Oh, but not you. It's not your pleasure to probe for news of them. You must put your wife to the proof yourself." Then skipping down a little bit here. "This haven, look around. It's named for Phorcus, the old god of the deep, and here at the harbor's head the branching olive stands, with the welcome cave nearby it, dank and with sea must, sacred to the nymphs of the spring that we call the Naiads." And so Odysseus starts to recognize things, and he knows that he needs to offer something to the Naiads. "Nymphs of the springs, Naiads, daughters of Zeus, I never dreamed I would see you again yet. Now rejoice in my loving prayers, and later, just like the old days, I will give you gifts. If Athena, Zeus's daughter, queen of the armies, comes to my rescue, grants this fighter life, and brings my son to manhood." "Courage," says Athena. "Free your mind of all the anguish now. Come, quick, let's bury the treasures here." So she helps to bury the treasure. And then they begin this plot to kill the suitors. "Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, old campaigner, think how to lay your hands on all those brazen suitors, lording it over your house now. 3 whole years, courting your noble wife, offering gifts to win her. But she, forever broken-hearted for your return, builds up each man's hope, dangling promises, dropping hints to each, but all the while with something else in mind. Then Odysseus compares himself. This is an interesting comparison. Of course, in literature, we call this a foil, and we've seen foil characters that are presented to bring out the characteristics of another character. But it's just an interesting moment where Agamemnon's situation and that's captured in the Oresteia shows up, and Odysseus compares himself, and he says, I'd rather have, clearly I might have died the same ignoble death as Agamemnon, bled white in my own house too, if you had never revealed this to me now. Goddess, point by point, come, weave us a scheme so I can pay them back. Stand beside me, Athena, fire me with daring fierce. Fierce is the day we ripped Troy's glittering crown of towers down. Stand by me, furious now as then, my bright-eyed one, and I would fight 300 men, great goddess, with you to brace me, comrade in arms in battle. And so we see the use of that tale of Agamemnon's death that's been so much a part of this text is now exactly being the opposite situation, right, of what Odysseus is going to have in store for himself. And Athena already says, I mean, we know what's going to happen, right? But Athena just then disguises Odysseus. She, gray eyes ablaze, the goddess urged him on. Surely I'll stand beside you and not forget you, not when the day arrives for us to do our work. Those men who court your wife and waste your goods, I have a feeling some will splatter your ample floors with all their blood and brains. Up now, quickly. So first I will transform you. No one must know who you are. You need to make your way to the swineherd first, in charge of the pigs. And so Athena, not only does she disguise him, but she's kind of fueled by this kind of revenge plot that is driving on Odysseus. She tells Odysseus then about Telemachus, who's off with Menelaus. And then she reassures him again here at the end, no need for the anguish, trust me, not for him. I escorted your son myself so he might make his name by sailing there. And so we see that this is also the story of Telemachus coming into his manhood, and he's gone out to search for his father's glory, and he's going to be returning with that. No more words, not now. Athena stroked Odysseus with her wand. She shriveled the supple skin on his lithe limbs, stripped the russet curls from his head, covered his body top to toe with wrinkled hide of an old man, and dimmed the fire in his eyes so shining once. She turned his shirt and cloak into squalid rags, ripped and filthy, smeared with the grime and soot. She flung over the long pelt of her bounding deer, rubbed bare, and gave him a staff and a beggar's sack, torn and tattered, slung from the fraying rope. All plans made, they went their separate ways, Athena setting off to bring Telemachus home from the hallowed Lacedaemon. And so this is something that we're going to see in coming books, but I just want to sort of make note of here. I want readers to sort of notice the broader scope of social life that is captured in Homer's telling of the tale here. Yes, of course, the main characters are all noble people, right? They all have servants. There seem to be palaces with towns of more normal working folk or sailors around that are in the know or partially in the know or gossipy or as we saw with the Phaeacians even, right? And now that Odysseus has become a beggar, he becomes the lowliest of men. We see the beggars go throughout streets with bags, right? This is not everyone gets treated with the law of Xenia, right? But there does seem to be an expansion of that law by the king and the beggar being put into the same person here. And I think that's going to be part of the commentary that we get from the text itself as we enter on to meet the loyal swineherd in the next contextualized reading, which we'll pick up with presently. Thanks for watching. Support us on Patreon if you can, if you want to, and have a great rest of your day or night or morning, wherever you're at, whenever you're at. Thanks for your attention.